think when thinking about barriers and enablers, something that really strikes me is that sense of to what extent is the endeavour in a vacuum or not. One of the challenges in workforce development, workforce transformation is to answer that simple question of why. Why are we doing this? Why are we embarking upon this change and endeavour? And I remember many years ago, it was actually one of my first experiences of workforce transformation, or not, as the case may be. There was a department in a large NHS organisation that had a service planning department and a workforce kind of planning and development department, and never the twain shall meet. So we were very often asked to develop new roles, new ways of working. But when we asked the question, why are we doing this? Once you scratched below the veneer, it was very often hard to get what I would call a robust answer. Certainly one that didn't have measurable benefits and impacts that had been identified and had been bought into. So I can think, and I'm sure others will think of, roles that were very much seen as initiatives. It was a good idea, we try them, but we don't think about the impact that role is going to have in terms of its own benefit, but also how it's going to interface with the wider team. I can think of a community-based role that was introduced probably about 16 years ago now, and it had very mixed success because you had an established workforce in place that almost felt this new role was being superimposed upon them, caused so much angst, anxiety, tension, that it really struggled to get off the ground. So I think turning that on its head, one of the key enablers of workforce transformation is when everybody can understand and answer that simple question of why are we doing this? What's the impact that we're looking to achieve? What are the benefits that we're trying to achieve for our citizens and our communities and our population? That's not to say that everyone will necessarily agree with the workforce transformation endeavour. People may have concerns or are very comfortable with a previous way of working, of a way teams configured, the duties that we ask people to do. But my experience tells me that if you take people with you on that journey and you can identify the link to the service benefit, for me, that is a key enabler of good workforce transformation, because you're doing it in the round.
It reminds me that in all pieces of of change work I've done across multiple sectors, the one thing that we always sort of are asking senior leaders to do and is not buy into the myth of, well, people are resistant to change, that's why this is difficult, they're resistant, they're difficult. Once you start changing people's roles, moving things around, setting on a process of change, people, it's not that people like or don't like change. People need meaning. They need to understand meaning, and they need to be engaged in that process. So very often you find that communication of why is not high enough. Maybe it's not understood. People aren't given the opportunity to contribute and feel like they're part of it. And whether, even if you do all of those things right, change is still a psychologically emotional experience that can make us feel vulnerable, uncertain. Who is that new person coming in? We like this group that we have that makes us feel secure and comfortable. So even if you do a change process really, really well, it will stir up some difficult emotions, and that's fine if you understand that, expect it, and give people time and space to work through, reflect on, talk about their feelings. So it's very often positioned in the individual, and actually what it is, it's about making a culture that is supported by senior leadership that understand that change needs a lot of attention and working through, and won't be an easy linear path, and will get into some clumsy difficulty. and it needs skill and time to work through that.
And I wonder, one of the barriers that we perhaps impose upon ourselves is very often workforce transformation takes place in a project-based environment, and projects notoriously can have a lot of energy to begin with, but then when it's essentially completed and you're trying to transfer it into what we call business as usual, it all goes a bit flat and kind of drifts into the sand, because a project environment by definition is an artificial environment. It's not meant to be sustainable and ongoing. And sometimes by funneling everything into a project environment, we're not building that sustainability and that longevity around some of those cultural aspects that you've talked on, Toby, that actually will deliver the benefits that we're trying to realise. Because everyone, I would say people pretend for projects, but people act in a defined way in a project environment, and then after it's over, it's like, well, we'll all go back to ranch and we'll all carry on the way that we've done so before. So is there something about seeing workforce transformation not as a defined specific project that happens in that artificial environment, but actually happens as part of that business as usual, ongoing, it's part of the day job?
It's really interesting because you talk about energy. And of course, in a piece of work we've done recently across a geographical region, across health and social care, we know that the front line achieved what they saw as workforce transformation, single point of access for service users, sharing of professional resource. It wasn't a project, it was COVID crisis wave one response. But it makes me think that energy that is sort of artificial or very real but doesn't last, because what we heard people saying was, as that crisis phase sort of dropped a bit, people were saying, the great things we've achieved we're losing again. So I think that's right. We need to see it as ongoing, fundamental, strategic priority, and needs continual kind of energy and resourcing.
Yes. And, just to say, I'm not an anti-project person by any means, because there are things you do need that structure and an environment for. But I think, reflecting on work that we've done, people almost did the transformation, in spite of, that they did it because they saw it needed to be done, because there was a very clear measurable impact and improvement for the end patient citizen population that they were serving. And I think we assume that workforce transformation begins and ends at the top, where actually for me it's about liberating everybody across the system, across the health and social care economy. Because actually the people who've got the answers, for me, I've discovered, are the people who are closest to the people who are in receipt of the care and health intervention. So I think for me, another enabler is, involve everybody, but work out who everybody is and engage with them in a meaningful way.
Talking about engagement, liberation, and purpose.
Absolutely.